Today's video is brought to you by An Eldritch Dream Games, a third-party developer for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. They're making totally custom content like the Merfolk and Fell Sign Ancestries and the Necrid Versatile Heritage. Check the link in the description to find out more. Howdy guys. You know, I'll be honest, I am heavily impressed at how far hotel amenities have come. They have this fancy shave gel, you know, you do the normal thing, you lather it up, you apply it, you leave it for like 15 seconds. Go grab a towel. Just give it a quick rub down and voila, technology. Howdy, my name is Nonat, and as you can see, I'm still in a hotel room. We are still not able to go back to our home, so we're just kind of chilling in here, which is why you get really garbage camera lighting. My phone would be better, but I actually don't have the transfer cable for my phone. I could do it over Bluetooth, but that would take like 3 hours because these video files are stupidly massive, so I'm gonna go with low quality video. This is a super casual video. I hope you guys are prepared to just sit back, chill, enjoy, get a snack, get a drink. There won't be a whole lot to look at on screen aside from my freshly shaven, beautiful face. I'm also likely not gonna be uploading any of my main content for the next few days. Any of those guides or anything I promised like that is probably not gonna happen because I want those whole series to have a consistent level of quality rather than a bunch of really decent, okay quality videos and then this one for the cleric guide and the lizard folk. I would just feel wrong and weird. So we're just gonna have some fun, have some casual videos like this one, which we should probably go ahead and get into. Today we're talking about my 5 NPC characters that sneak their way into every campaign I run. No matter how hard I try, no matter how unique I write my NPCs, these 5 characters always show up somewhere. I almost always purposefully write my important NPCs not in any of these 5 tropes, but then, you know, at some point the players go off in a random direction and I'm like, oh, who's there? Pull something random out of my butt, and it's always one of the same 5. Starting off, a simple one that's probably my favorite, it's the Stubborn Dwarf. While it's an RPG stereotype at this point, I can't help myself. I love the classic dwarf who's just tough to work with, has a kind soul, but it's my way or the highway or I'm walking. I think part of my love for it is that my first real character in a campaign that I played for more than 1 or 2 sessions was a dwarven cleric named Jorv. He was definitely the stereotype, and in retrospect, I was probably more stubborn than I really should have been. I don't remember a lot of details about that campaign, but I can almost guarantee I really played into the character to the dismay likely of my fellow players. But I love this trope, and he always sneaks in a different way. Sometimes he's a merchant, sometimes he's a bandit. He's already been in both of my Patreon campaigns. In one of them, he was a hunter who went out with the group to gather food for a town, and in the other one, he was an undead skeletal guardsman. But he died really fast. Thanks, Alex. I think the thing that brings me back to the dwarf is just how recognizable the voice is. You know, someone starts talking like this in a D&D campaign or a Pathfinder campaign or any fantasy setting, you know what they're doing. It's that weird amalgamation of this fake Scottish accent with the low, gruff tone of voice, so you know it's not a halfling. You know this is a dwarf from the second you hear it, and honestly, that can be really helpful. When you're playing a game in the theater of the mind, having something instantly recognizable can help the story progress. You know, you don't need to spend 5 minutes describing this dwarf because everyone knows it's a dwarf. You know, they can tell just from the voice and everything that they get the picture instantaneously, and it's incredibly helpful to just keep things flowing. Next up, following up with another recognizable trope is one that every GM has dealt with from time to time: the NPC Party Member. Now, this happens in almost every campaign I play, but I've only actually planned for it to happen once or twice. Like, maybe the party is new in town and they're going out hunting, so the actual town hunters accompany them on the first outing, and that's it. They usually leave it at that. But there are times where the most random NPCs who are supposed to be one and done in like a 5-minute interaction ended up sticking around for the entire campaign. And then I need to make a full character sheet for them, because if they're going to be around for combat, even if they're not good at combat, they still need stats. Or you can forget to make a character sheet even when the character's been traveling with the party for 10 sessions and the campaign finishes. It's okay, none of my players watch my videos. Maybe. The weirdest thing that happens is when the NPC becomes a party member when they haven't even tagged along on an adventure yet. In my first major Pathfinder 2e campaign back in January, my players saved a little goblin girl. Probably, I think she was only like 5 or 6 because goblins grow up really fast. She was basically like an older teenager in goblin years named Rita, and she was just a servant to this rich Kadiran noble, and they were busting him for doing a bunch of corrupt stuff, and they let all the servants go. Well, afterwards, they found Rita outside the mansion with no clue where to go, because I stupidly was like, oh, I don't know who my parents are, I've just worked here my whole life, I don't know where I'm going. So of course my players were like, you're coming with us! And I'm like, she doesn't have a home, she doesn't have any reason to say no. Alright, Rita joins the party. And that's how Rita became a main character through the entire campaign. She was there up until the final boss fight, and she was beloved. Even had a light romantic interest with the goblin champion in our party, and it was kind of adorable. This third NPC is a bit less specific, but I've dubbed it the Lovable Goofball. This is a character I do slide in on purpose. Of these 5, this is the one I most purposefully use all the time when the game needs some comic relief or the campaign is just going in a silly direction. The Lovable Goofball isn't constrained to any kind of race or class or anything like that, but they do meet the few requirements every time. They are incredibly scatterbrained and lose attention and track of things constantly. They work at a job that they have absolutely no clue how to do, and they vocalize tons of their thoughts and feelings directly to the players, which makes the players either super uncomfortable or adore the NPC. I've seen it go both ways. Only one of my Patreon campaigns has run into this character, and in that one it was Henry the Ghoul, who ran an inn on an island inhabited solely by undead. Now, undead don't need to sleep, so his inn gets no business, but when the group of living party members showed up, boy was he excited. Henry's basically just all over the place, excited to have somebody in his place of business and make a sale, but because he's done no business, he has no idea what he's doing, to the point where he asks the players how much he should be charging them to stay at his inn. It was a hilarious interaction and a ton of fun. Now, my advice, if you choose to use the Lovable Goofball in your games, is keep them in short burst places. An inn is a fantastic place to have one, or a shopkeep, because what's really adorable and charming for 5 minutes can get really obnoxious after an hour. The fourth NPC I always end up using is a weird one and might be mostly unique to me. I don't know if any of you constantly use this, but in every one of my campaigns, there is always an angry human male. And I'm not talking about like angry for a specific reason. I'm talking about just like their personality is testy and irritable. Every campaign, I have no idea why, but he always pops up somewhere, and his character is always slightly different depending on the setting, but he's always a human male, and I don't know why. I do love using this character though, because it leads to some fun roleplay opportunities for my players. You know, they get to interact and learn more about this, you know, it's not quite the dark brooding rogue in the corner, but more like a grizzled war veteran who's sick of it all and just completely jaded by life. I like it because while some players are instantly dismissive and like, I don't want to deal with this guy right now, there's always at least one who spends some extra time with the character. This angry human male is always a little bit deeper on the inside, and it's really nice, especially, if they roll their diplomacy well or just have good overall interactions with him. It's cool to see them break this rough exterior. Sometimes he'll crack a smile or even laugh, and they can make friends with this guy who's super irritated on the outside, but is still human, metaphorically. Obviously he's still human, but I mean emotionally and with the whole feelings. Really, it's because of those kinds of moments that I have no problem when Angry McTesty shows up. I just never plan for him to show up. And finally, my fifth and final NPC that somehow slides into every campaign I make. Have any guesses? That's right, it's the elemental who's stuck on the material plane and can't get back to their home plane. I'm not making this up, and I honestly don't know how to explain it, but in every single campaign I run, there's always an elemental of some kind. In my Sands of Qadira game I ran in early January, there was a wind genie who was stuck in an urn being traded around through the slave market that they rescued from some evil half-orcs. In both of my Patreon campaigns, one of them is dealing with a sassy fire elemental who lives in a forge and just likes it because it's cozy, and as long as the players don't mess with her, she's not messing with them. And the other Patreon campaign is messing with a wind elemental, a living hurricane, who is magically sealed and stuck on an island, and longs to be free, but also he thinks of himself as royalty, and the players are working underneath him, and it's just so much fun, and I don't know why it's always an elemental. I didn't even realize I was using this like as a pattern in all my campaigns until I wrote this script and looked back on it. I was struggling to think of my 5th NPC I use all the time, and then it just kind of hit me that in all of my recent campaigns, I always have an elemental somewhere. And I think it might be because of their intelligence. You know, they're not from the material plane, but they're still smart creatures. You know, they're not necessarily evil by nature, and even something like a fire elemental, which may be lawful evil in the book, lawful evil doesn't mean they're going to kill the players on sight, you know? As long as they can work together and the players can be useful, you know, they can coexist. And so I almost never use these elementals as enemies, and rather use them as, you know, quest givers or important plot points, and it leads to some really cool situations. As far as roleplay goes, my players, you know, you never know what to expect from an elemental. They're not of the material plane, so you never know if they're going to attack you on sight, if they're going to be using you, if they're going to trick you. You never know what's going to happen when you're messing with something from a different plane, and I think that's why I end up using them. I think I always want something that's like, oh, what are my players never going to expect? An elemental! They'll never see that coming again! I guess they're just really fun to use, and that's why I keep coming back to them. And those are my 5 NPCs that show up way more often than they should. I'm curious to hear from you guys now. GMs, do you have any NPCs that you use, like, a little more often, or use to fall back on, just in case your players go somewhere you don't expect? I'm curious to hear about your most commonly used NPCs, or tropes, or stereotypes you rely on. And don't worry, players, I haven't forgotten about you. The next video I'm going to make and release is going to be on the 5 player characters I always make. Granted, I'm more of a GM than a player, but my player ideas in both video games and TTRPGs are usually pretty similar, so I'll have a lot of material to work with. But for now, I'd just like to give a huge shout out to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. If you too would like to support me financially through Patreon, you can check out the link right at the top of the description. It'll take you right there, and you can pledge for as little as $5 a month. You'll occasionally get some free stuff like an exclusive video or some behind the scenes stuff, and sometimes even some Pathfinder 2e homebrew exclusively created by me. Additionally, we have some new goals, which you can see on screen right now on the Patreon, and when we hit those goals, you know, they'll happen, you know, that's what they're there for, and I've got some really cool stuff in the works. So thank you all so much for understanding with the whole hotel fire situation, and sincerely, thank you to those of you who have been so positive in the last few days. It's been a wildfire, no pun intended, on the internet, and I just appreciate everyone out there who is keeping it positive, keeping it civil, and just, I don't know, people who are just being gracious about everything. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, no nat ones.